says it's recording, but that doesn't mean anything anymore. Hi, everyone. I'm Zazubaar. Oh, it's episode 90 of the Demons from Outer Space. How many times am I going to have to say that before it's going to stick? Tell me, D. Tell me.
I don't think it's ever going to end.
D, do you want to explain to these people what's happened while I go beat my fucking head against a wall?
Sure. So this is the third attempt to record this episode of the Demons from Outer Space. The first time that we recorded it was great.
That helped a lot.
And then it didn't save the recording for some stupid fucking reason. And then so tonight we got together to try and record it again, and we only got so far before fucking my computer died. And so we lost that as well. So this is our third attempt.
How dare your computer die? I have no fucking condolences to offer you over your dead computer. Fuck it. I'm gonna piss on its grave.
I feel nothing for it anymore either.
Good.
I really need a new one.
Yeah.
It hasn't been well for a long time. All I can do is sort of make it comfortable.
Oh, all right. Well, let's not prolong this any more than we need to. It's 12:30 in the morning. This is the second time we're trying this. The third time overall we're trying this. But D, what are we gonna try and review for the third time to tell the people?
This is Ghost Rider.
It's Ghost Rider. We were mentioning it on the past two episodes. We're bringing Ghost Rider in. It's Marvel Spotlight issue 5 to 12. First two issues of Ghost Rider solo series. It's his origin. It's the first story arc. Oh boy.
Second story arc. It's two story arcs and an origin story. It's a thing I read recently and got really excited about it, but now the mood has passed. But we're going to talk about it anyway.
What is this? What is this recording even? Like, we're just like, oh, we talked about this like an hour ago already. Like, we're just tossing it at the wall. I feel like we should do something to differentiate it, so that way we're not talking about the same things over and over again. Why don't we start?
I mean, I feel bad because at one point I was so excited to do this review that I made a fucking custom title card, but now I'm just so apathetic to it.
Well, this is the third time we've had to do this, and we've already done it a second time, like tonight. So this is just, and it's late, and we're both tired, and we're angry and frustrated. This is not the best conditions to record a podcast under. Maybe it's the best. Maybe this will turn out like a surprise, like best episode of DFOS ever. I doubt it though. I doubt that we'll reach any new podcasting highs in this. But so we've started these last two exactly the same way, talking about the origin. Why don't we start out talking about the history of Ghost Rider? Change things up a little bit.
Sure.
So,
as I mentioned in the last two fucking recordings, during the 70s, there was a bit of a boom.
Rolling 70s.
There was a bit of a boom of interest into the supernatural, with things such as The Exorcist and The Omen and Ouija boards, etc., etc. You see this in Japan. They created Devilman in 1971, and then a few months later, not accusing Marvel of anything, a very similar character came to be, known as Ghost Rider,
who was a character already, and that's where the fun history lesson comes in. So prior to Ouija boards and Satan being really popular in the 70s, in the 60s, Westerns were really popular. And comics and pulp magazines and all the disposable entertainment that you could wipe your ass with was all about Westerns. It was all about gunslingers and horses and snakes biting people and all kinds of great stuff like that. And out of that came some masked Avenger type of heroes. Hard to call them superheroes. You know, your kind of Zorro-esque caped crusaders who were fucking around in the West, shooting people and tying up Indian women or whatever they were doing. And there was a character called Ghost Rider, the Ghost Rider, that came out of that. He was decked out in all white. He rode on a white horse, and he was called the Ghost Rider because he was all white and he looked like a phantom. This was before your kind of creepier notions about ghosts, I think, became a thing. Where it was like, oh, we'll make it like a demon more than a ghost, where it'll be like all demonic and about hell and fire and all that crazy crap. Ghost Rider's a white guy in a white costume. Accurate. He
Correct.
liked...
Not a black man.
No, there were a couple of different names for him. There was the original, I forget what the fucking name of the magazine company was that originally started the character. His name was Rex Fury. Or, no, that was the one that was Carter Slade. I'm sorry. His name was Carter Slade. He was the name of the guy under the mask. He rides around for those books in a bit, shoots people. That company goes out of business, as many pulp and magazine and comic companies did in the 60s, in the boom of your success of Marvel and DC. So in the 70s, Marvel buys all these characters, and they have the rights to the names and everything, and they restart a couple of their characters with new looks and everything. And they bring back the Ghost Rider exactly as he was. Stan Lee was writing it. Changed the name of the guy under the mask to Rex Fury. Kept everything the same. He's a guy. He's in a white outfit. He has a flashlight pointed at him, and he looks like he doesn't have a head. That was his gimmick, because that was like a ghost type of thing, I guess, in the 60s and 70s. It was kind of shit, not gonna lie. But it was a Western, and Westerns were popular still, even though that company had gone out of business producing them. They were still popular. But that was the whole deal with that version of the Ghost Rider, was that he was just kind of, he was a trickster. He didn't have actual ghostly powers. He was just a no good lying son of a bitch trickster. But he was doing good things, I think. I never read those comics. They're probably garbage. But they never really indicated him to be much of a superhero, more of a just kind of a guy who occasionally did things, maybe for money. I don't know. But he was incorporated into the Marvel Universe later, after the real Ghost Rider started. They used the name Ghost Rider, cool sounding name. They decided they were going to use it as a villain and reuse the character's name and kind of gimmick as for a Daredevil villain, but they decided the idea was too good and the design was too good, the Flaming Skull design at this point, so they gave him his own book, and that's where we ended up with. But the white Rex Fury, all decked out in white Ghost Rider on the horse, was renamed the Knight Rider initially, which didn't work because that's the name of a KKK figure, and he looks identical to that design, all decked out in white on a white horse. So they couldn't use that name. So then they changed it to...
Later on, Knight Rider became a David Hasselhoff show.
Yeah, but that has the K in it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they couldn't have gotten away with it if it was the N. That people would have written letters in those days. But they changed it to the Phantom Rider then, and that's how it is now whenever they bring back that dumb character for a dumb reason.
And there have been comics where, like, the Ghost Rider and the Phantom Rider meet. They do shit. The name Carter Slade.
He usually works for S.H.I.E.L.D., and Carter Slade, as you were about to mention probably, but I'm going to steal it from you, was co-opted into being the original Western Ghost Rider, but like the actual demonic Flaming Skull Ghost Rider.
Right. If you saw the Nick Cage movie, then you're familiar with Sam Elliott's mumbly rendition of that character.
We kind of sound like him right now because we're really tired.
No, I think you can still tell what we're saying. The problem with Sam Elliott is in that movie, he's like, the Ghost Rider, and
when a rider does a thing, and a rider rides on to ride, and he rides still, and he'll keep riding.
I can only ride one more time.
But then I'll keep riding in the ride and beyond the ride, and I'll keep riding.
Right.
Riders.
Right. Sometimes there's a rider.
Colt. That's the Ranch reference for my The Ranch fans out there. Anyway, so D, we haven't really started talking about the comics yet. So that's where Ghost Rider came from. He kind of came from a weird, co-opted, stitched together background of ideas and characters and creators. Even there was controversy in the creation of Ghost Rider that kept up until very recently, like when the movie came out. There were different writers and artists who were involved. You know, Stan Lee was involved, Gary Friedrich, Roy Thomas, Mike Ploog, Marv Wolfman, other people. All were involved in the creation of Ghost Rider. And it's been disputed since the creation who came up with the different elements. Who decided it should be a flaming skull? Who decided on the Elvis black leather suit gimmick? Who decided on the Evel Knievel like origin and personality and all that? Johnny Blaze was always credited to Stan Lee for the name because it's really fucking obvious. I think everybody was like, Stan mandated that one, that if you called Johnny Blaze, you were stuck with it. It's a cool name, but it's a little on the nose. especially since he's had that name prior to being the Ghost Rider. So it's a little coincidental that he gets those powers, but that's where it all came from, and people fought over it for decades, and lawsuits happened. I believe if I remember my Marvel history correctly, Gary Friedrich was the guy who did most of the suing, and I could be wrong, and he could be a great, wonderful human being who never sued anybody. But I remember reading that book, Marvel: The Untold Story, he was the guy who was like, "No, I created everything in Ghost Rider." But the name, of course, he couldn't claim that. Maybe he did though. Maybe he was a crazy man. But who knows?
I traveled back in time and gave that name to the Carter Slade people.
Yeah, exactly. I went back and I created that character retroactively. It's crazy. Anyway, though, what I was gonna say was a lot of that is reflected in these early issues. I think the kind of uncertainty as to what exactly this thing is and what the point of it is kind of comes from the think tank means of Ghost Rider's creation. You know, Gary Friedrich wanted to make a kind of spooky ghost comic out of a cool motorcycle stunt comic, but those elements kind of aren't balanced and come and go as the writing needs them to, I feel. So there's a lot of uncertainty in these early issues.
Much like early Hulk, they're constantly redefining how the powers work, how the transformation happens. They're not really sure what the character of Johnny Blaze is yet. The idea of the Ghost Rider having its own separate personality isn't a thing in these early issues. When he transforms, he's pretty much just himself.
Except he talks real weird. He talks like Bela Lugosi Dracula.
Yeah, but that's done on purpose. He refers to it as his spook act. Whereas in later Ghost comics, after it's revealed that the demon has its own personality, it just becomes a natural part of his speech.
In later Ghost comics, like just in generic comics about ghosts.
Indeed. So yeah, I think that's all the background information they need, don't you, Bill?
I would have to agree.
Okay. So, the first issue, Marvel Spotlight number 5.
Trudging on then.
Yeah, Marvel Spotlight number 5. We're going to talk about this one in pretty good detail just because it's the origin story, so it's kind of important, but the rest of them we'll kind of gloss over a bit more.
Because they're less memorable and mostly the same over and over again.
Indeed. So unlike most superhero origin stories done by Marvel at the time, we open on him already as the Ghost Rider, and then his origin story is told in flashback. We see him driving through the rain. It's a beautiful shot. Mike Ploog is one of the best artists that early Ghost Rider had.
Yeah, and this first issue definitely has the best art. And by the way, read these in color. Just want to throw that out there right away so I don't have to go on my tirade about it again and again. But read these in color. Do not read them in black and white. Don't make the same mistake that I made as a kid, because I would have gotten into these probably a lot more had I read them in color as a kid, and I'm really glad that I finally got to now, because you really appreciate the spectacle of these things a lot more when you see what they were really supposed to look like in color week to week when you're buying the issues. It's great. It's amazing. Especially the first issue. My fucking god. Mike Ploog draws a sexy-ass Ghost Rider.
So we see Ghost Rider driving around in the rain at night. And then every Ghost Rider issue, at least in these early days, pretty much has to have Ghost Rider have a run-in either with some thugs or the police. So that happens. And then afterwards...
In this early issue, it's robbers who he comes across, decides not to stop from mugging somebody. He drives on, they see him, they peg him as a witness to their crime, so they chase after him, which I think is a great fucking moment, because he has to face the consequences of his own inaction. He might as well have just stepped in and tried to stop them from robbing that person. As he narrates to himself, because he's constantly feeling sorry for himself in his own head in these early issues, he goes, if I wanted to, I could just go in and stop that, but I can't because I don't want anybody to know what's happened to me. But he's got the power. He's a fucking servant of Satan with the power of hellfire. He can do whatever he wants, realistically.
Exactly.
Except stop being that, ironically enough. There's a lot of really good ideas and character depth in just the really terrible nature of Johnny's situation. Although it is a bit less terrible, maybe, or maybe not, than later scenarios where the Ghost Rider is an alternate personality. But, because he's still got his own personality, as we mentioned. when he transforms. Which one would you find worse? Transforming into a thing like a guy with a flaming skull for a head, and you still had your personality, you still had your full mental faculties, or if like this just horrible demon personality took over and you had the flaming skull, but you had no control over that? Which one would you think? Which do you think would be the worst circumstance to be in?
I think the demon thing for sure. Because I mean, if you're gonna transform into a thing, you want to at least have control over it. I don't want to have some of those like werewolf mornings where you wake up the next day and you're in the middle of the forest and there's like a dead deer and blood everywhere, and you're like, "What the fuck did I do last night?" Like, I don't need that.
You were a Ghost Rider that killed the deer and ate it. Like, that's not really a Ghost Rider. You think you'd cook it at the very least then if you're gonna do it as Ghost Rider. But I would, because I think potentially the biggest issue with this early idea of him keeping his personality when he's Ghost Rider, and what I think might be an issue if you were stuck with that situation, is that he doesn't have anything to do when he's the Ghost Rider. Like, he just has to kind of run off and hide so that way no one sees him. Like, at least if it was a demon that was taking over, you would have the excuse of, I had no control, it took over, it's going off doing its own thing that no one would recognize as me anyway, because it's the demon with its own motivations. But when you are in control of this horrible monster form, you also have the responsibility of doing something with it. So what is he going to do? He just goes off and hides. So I think it makes him less proactive. And that's something that I think is also an issue in these early stories, is that he's kind of whiny, as we've mentioned. He's kind of not proactive, because, again, he's just constantly feeling sorry for himself and running off and hiding. And even when he's not the Ghost Rider, like, in this first issue, he's driving around on his motorcycle getting chased by these robbers, feeling sorry for himself, as I keep mentioning. Then he stops being the Ghost Rider, and he starts thinking about his origin story. But just prior to that, when he goes back to his dressing room, he's finally not the Ghost Rider. He can go out and do normal guy stuff. But what does he decide to do? He just goes and sits in his dressing room and just goes over his own sob story in his own head. I didn't really like that. Like, I mean, I get why they felt the need to do it, because they wanted him to go over his origin. But I feel like you could have had him do something else and then have the flashback. Like, you could have had him go, well, time to get ready for the show, and then he just starts reminiscing about his backstory because he's seeing all of the different iconography of a circus bike show. But there isn't really any of that. He just sits in a chair and closes his eyes and cries about, you know, his motorcycle blowing up that killed his adoptive mother and all the other stuff. You know, I don't know, man. Right. I didn't love that.
A lot of it goes to how comics were written at the time. It's a much less complicated medium than it is now. So yeah, he dispatches the crooks, and then he just sort of goes away and transforms back into his normal self and begins reminiscing about his origin story. The origin itself, if you've seen the movie, then it's very similar. There's just, you know, the biggest difference between the movie version of his origin and the comic book version of his origin is that there's just more things to go over with the comic book version of his origin. And that's ultimately what I think its downfall is the plot of it is a bit too overcluttered. Like, you don't need the whole subplot where his adoptive mother gets killed and then makes him swear never to ride in the show again. It's just not necessary. It just adds all this extra melodrama that you don't need.
Yeah, which I think is the thing that makes these really hard. Not really hard, because I did enjoy them. But I think it makes it difficult to go back and read them now, is how melodramatic they are. Like,
right.
It's so many points you're just like, oh my god, calm down and get over yourself. And I think part of that is also, or this works into that, as you mentioned, his origin story is kind of overdone. There's too many elements to it. He has too many family members die. His dad dies in a motorcycle accident. His adoptive mother dies after a motorcycle blows up. His adoptive dad dies in a motorcycle accident. It's a little much, don't you think? And then he makes a deal with the devil. It's a little crazy. And then you've got the oath that you mentioned on top of it. And on top of that, the overcomplicated origin, you've got fucking this overwritten, like, just captions upon captions, just over dramatically explaining this shit. Whereas the visuals do a perfectly good job of telling you what's going on. You just need dialogue, and sometimes it's nice to know what the people are thinking and what exactly is going on behind the scenes. But it's just this just paragraph upon paragraph of just intricately describing what we're seeing in gory detail that's just unnecessary and just makes the whole thing kind of laughable. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and again, this all goes back to kind of how comic books were written back in the day. You see the same sort of things when you go back and read old Spider-Man, and you have paragraphs describing like him swinging through the city and shit, and you're like, I'm looking at it.
But I feel like I'm more okay with that just because I just feel like there's more going on, and there's more happening in the moment. Like, but in this, it's just like he's sitting in a fucking dressing room, D. Like, it's even better when he's riding around early on. Like, that's the other thing too, and this is just how they're written. Every single issue also opens with a recap of the last issue. And it's always done in terms of like, Johnny Blaze remembers that the reason that he's here is because last time his girlfriend was bitten by a snake and his dad made a deal with the devil, except that didn't happen, and he made a deal with the devil, and his dad fought him with a sword. It's great. I kept skipping those parts because I just wanted to get to the new stuff, you know?
Yeah. And again, it's done because back in the day it was because, somebody might miss an issue and they want to be able to pick up the next issue and be able to tell what's going on, or somebody might get into the series late and then have to go start buying back issues, and so if they can't find one, then at least they still have an idea of what's going on.
Spoilers for this, by the way. We didn't mention that earlier, but we're going to spoil the shit out of this, so.
Oh, yeah.
If you know you want to read it, go read it. It's definitely worth it.
I didn't think I needed
otherwise
to give a spoiler warning.
Otherwise, we're just gonna rip into the gory details.
I didn't think I needed to give a spoiler warning for something that came out in 1971, but whatever.
Well, some people, they want to go back and read this stuff, and then they hear people talk about it, and they don't, they get mad. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Get mad if you want. It's fine. I just won't read the comments. Go ahead, D.
Be pissed. Anyway, so it's really weird to say this because everything after that point in the movie is garbage, but the movie does the origin story way better than this comic does. I feel, because all you need is the parental figure coming down with cancer, the deal with the devil, and then bada bing, bada boom.
His relationship with Roxanne is important. It's important to where his head's at, but it's not really important to where exactly or why exactly he makes the deal with the devil. Maybe a little, but not really. And also, it doesn't really have anything to do with the devil himself. Like, the devil doesn't really care about Roxanne. And I just think that works better. You're right, it simplifies it. And yeah, I think that movie is fine until Nicolas Cage actually pops up in it. Like, once Nick Cage is fully grown in that dumb white outfit at the fucking arena show, jumping a bunch of helicopters, I'm just like, what? This is not what I wanted. Because before that, you've got the younger guy playing Johnny Blaze, and it's just kind of like a low-key, kind of like 70s sort of biker thing. Like a sort of kitschy stunt show, gritty kind of 70s biker movie, and I don't know, it has a more authentic Ghost Rider feel than later on when it just kind of feels like a dumb modern blockbuster. But anyway, we're not talking about that movie. We're talking about...
You also have Peter Fonda doing like a really, really good devil. Anyway.
He is really good. The devil in this is really good too, though. Not Mephisto as of yet. Just good old-fashioned Satan at this point.
It is important to note. This is before the retcons that made it so that Ghost Rider made his deal with Mephisto specifically. This was before we had this big Marvel pantheon of demons who all use the name Satan on occasion. In these early Ghost Rider comics, it is good old-fashioned Bible Satan.
He's a weird red figure appearing out of fire. You don't really see him clearly at some points, and when you do, he looks real dumb. But when he's obscured in shadow and in fire and in his kind of mystique, he's fucking cool as shit.
Well, that's the thing that Mike Ploog does in this first issue that I really like, is that he keeps most of the devil in shadow. It's only until you get into the later portions of this run that some of the other artists start having him just like out in full view, and it's like, then I'm like, no, he doesn't look as good. I like it with it, whereas his head is pretty much always in shadow when Ploog draws him, and then like all you're really seeing is his chest and arms and shit in the red.
Do you even like it better than Mephisto's design? Because I do.
Yeah, I mean, Mephisto actually designed before all of this happened, because he's originally from an issue of Silver Surfer that was published in the 60s. I believe it was still the 60s. So
because he's
Mephisto,
not the traditional Bible devil. He's an interdimensional being that fills that role.
right. And so later on they retconned it to where he's the one that gives Ghost Rider the deal because I guess they were no longer comfortable with the whole Satan thing, and they sort of retcon it so that there's a whole bunch of interdimensional demon beings who use the name Satan on occasion.
Now, what do they do with the son of Satan after that, Damien Hellstrom? I mean, we'll have to talk about him a bit towards the end.
He's the son of like I said, there's all these different demons that use the name Satan sometimes. He's the son of one of them. I forget the thing's name because it has a really
not
weird
Mephisto, though?
No, it's a different Satan, which is confusing because in these
That's
early
super confusing because he's the son of the Satan who makes the deal with Ghost Rider in this.
Exactly. You just got to remember that Marvel never really did.
And it's crazy because at one time, before very recently, all of their stuff was canonical with each other, kind of. Like, they had kept one ongoing universe that they just retconned.
Exactly. That's the thing you got to remember.
Madness.
That's why it gets kind of confusing is because it's just a bunch of retcons. It could be, this is kind of my theory, like Mephisto's the one who makes the deal as Satan, and then maybe some different demons like try on different occasions to cash in on that deal by taking the same Satan form. So maybe it's Mephisto that makes the deal with them in this issue, and then the other one who actually is Damon's dad is the one who's doing all that shit in that issue. Is the only way that I can make sense of it in my mind, if that makes any sense to you.
I guess I don't think they thought about it that much though. So I don't know.
Oh, they definitely did because at this point it was just Satan.
Well, what else do we really have to say about the first issue?
Damon Hellstrom and Blackheart are not brothers. I'm sorry to tell y'all.
Oh right, I forgot that fucking Blackheart is the son of Mephisto in modern Ghost Rider lore and also in that movie. God, that movie sucks at that point. He's such a bad villain.
Once the time skip happens, you're pretty much just waiting for Ghost Rider or Peter Fonda.
He doesn't even have anything good to fight in that movie, though. He doesn't have anything good to fight in either of them. Because in the second one, they do Blackout, who doesn't look anything like he does in the comics, and also poses no real physical threat to Ghost Rider. Why aren't they giving Ghost Rider just, like, demons to fight? Throw Vengeance in there. Do, like, I don't know. You could do Curly even from early Ghost Rider. Curly's the villain in the second issue 6. Do him, and we can talk about how you could have done a better movie plot based on what they do with Curly.
Yeah, I was gonna say when we got to that, I think this first arc in these comics would make a great like Ghost Rider movie, provided you set it in the 70s.
Yeah, I do ultimately think that Johnny Blaze is best served to be kept in that time period because these books are so of the time, and some of the commentary on those what were modern tropes are cool, and I think that they should be maintained.
Well, they could get away with it because they have Robbie Reyes on the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show now, but we've seen other, like the fact that there's more than one Ghost Rider riding around. So it's already in continuity with the current Marvel shit that there's like Ghost Riders and that they're a thing and that they've been around for who knows how long. So it's entirely possible and quite easy to just say, here's a movie set in the 70s with Johnny Blaze, and it's Matthew McConaughey, because one, I think he would actually do a good job, and also I just love the idea of him being a Satan worshiper in a movie because he's all about that Jesus. Speaking of which, another thing that the movie actually did a little bit better than this comic is introducing the devil into the story, because in this, it just sort of comes right the fuck out of nowhere.
Oh right, yeah, we got to talk about that. So there's a great page, right?
He's going about his sort of soap opera backstory, and then all of a sudden you just cut to a panel of him reading an occult book and yelling, "Satan!"
And the transition is great. It's just him doing, like, weird, like, just kind of basic, mundane, day-to-day stuff. He's going, oh my god, Crash Simpson's gonna die of cancer, how terrible, this is awful. And then he just goes over to, like, a bookshelf, and he's like, oh, I know, there's only one thing that can help me. There's only one thing, Dylan, that I can possibly turn to in this entire world to help me in this situation. You want to know what that thing is? Satan. And in the next panel, he's just naked down to the waist, pentagram painted on his chest, and he's calling out to Satan. It's quite the leap, and it's hilarious. And then, and I mentioned this maybe earlier, there's no setup to the fact that he or anybody that he is like familially tied to. There's no setup to the fact that any of them might be Satanists. So when he just all of a sudden, that seems to be the case later.
but once he goes to time to summon Satan, it's weird. Like in the movie, again, this is everything they did with the origin story is fine. Okay, in the movie, like Satan, Mephisto rather, comes to him for whatever reason, destiny or whatnot, and that kind of works better because it would be awkward to kind of set up the fact that your protagonist is a Satanist, and also might make him a little bit less sympathetic.
Well, what they explain is that he just likes to read about it. Like he finds the mythology interesting, so he just knows about it anyway. And he figures, and I think he figures, if I can do this and it can save him, I should. I have the obligation to try. So he does, and it turns out going really bad for him.
Yeah. But somehow Roxy saves him, but through the power of her love.
Oh my god! Which is also a funny bit because, as I mentioned at some point prior to this, I believe there's a lot of gay subtext in this in these early Ghost Rider issues. There's a whole lot of sexual imagery, but there's particularly a kind of gay, kind of homoerotic sort of flavor to all of the Satan stuff. Because first things,
I wonder why you're interpreting it that way, Bill.
Well, I'll tell you, and I don't think I'm reading too much into it because initially when Johnny Blaze makes the deal with Satan, right before Roxanne comes in and saves him with her good Christian pure heart, he's like, he's naked to the waist. He's just his no shirt, pentagram on the chest, and Satan just like kind of grabs him with like a translucent hand, and Johnny's pose is all like, oh, like he's all like just loving it and shit, and he's just like being taken in by the raw power of Satan. And it just looks like he's having an orgasm, like he's just coming in his pants. You can't not see that when you look at that panel. You can't tell me that you don't see that, you lying sack of shit. And then after that, like...
I didn't interpret it that way the first time I read it, to be honest, but when you mentioned that the first fucking time we recorded this episode, I looked at it again and I was like, I can kind of see it, yeah.
And then also, there's like a whole bunch of panels where he's like splayed out on a fucking like couch or whatever. And he's just drawn as like a fucking cover girl model. There's the bit in the 6th issue, or the 2nd issue of the run, but it's Marvel Spotlight number 6, where like Ghost Rider joins up with the biker gang, and he's like kind of seduced into it by Curly, who has these like manipulative mind-bending powers. And it's kind of like got this gay subtext of like, oh, it's this young, innocent man being seduced into this subversive lifestyle. And I think that it's very of the time, like kind of associating this homoerotic imagery with this Satanist, like promiscuous kind of culture, like this what's the word? Submersive kind of culture, like just this, dark evil kind of stuff. I don't know. I'm not saying that I associate that kind of stuff with it. Don't read into it. Don't read in what I'm saying that much. I'm just saying that I think the book thinks that, and I think that's just very of the time.
It's weird.
Anyway, though, let's move on. We're already pretty far into this, and we want to keep this at an hour or so.
Yeah. So one trope that arises a lot in these early Ghost Rider stories, because they use Satan as a villain like every other issue for a while, and it becomes a problem because he
doesn't really have much of a rogues gallery, does he? Especially early on.
Not in this run we're talking about. No. Later on, he gets some villains like Orb and whatnot. But right now,
I love Orb. Orb's great.
But right now, he ain't got shit. So Satan just sort of keeps popping up and keeps trying to steal a soul, and they make Satan boring because Satan, he shows up, he has a plan to try and steal Johnny's soul and complete the deal, but they always have to write some like contrived bullshit to get him out of it.
Somebody always fucks Satan over and saves Johnny's ass. Johnny never does anything of his own heroic volition to stop whatever Satan's doing. Fucking crash.
This time it's Roxy. Later on, there's a mysterious hooded figure that saves Johnny. After that, it's the son of Satan.
Oh, right, I forgot about him. Then it's Damian Hellstrom, yeah. At one point, it's kind of the witch woman kind of saves him too, or she saves Roxy.
And I
Um,
not, there's a point in one of the comics later on, like after he goes and becomes a stunt cyclist at that movie studio, there's a point in one of the comics where fucking Jesus saves him. So,
right, yeah, the friend. We could talk about that at another time. But yeah, no,
so
that's the other thing too, D, is that all these comics are kind of the same. Like they all follow the same tropes. Roxy always gets captured. There's always a police chase. There's always a fight with some street toughs. Johnny's always feeling sorry for himself in his dressing room. There's always some stunt cyclist daring do. And then there's a showdown with Satan, and there's satanic worshippers, and it's just kind of all the same. And I feel like it works a lot better in the first issue, for one, but then also in the subsequent initial story arc with Curly and with Satan manipulating Johnny into kind of giving up his soul willingly. And who it turns out that Curly is. Should we just spoil that right outright? Because Curly, the leader of the...
let's just go ahead and get into the Curly story, because I think we've said about all we can really say about the origin.
For sure. But Curly is the head of a biker gang who initially tries to beat the fucking shit out of Ghost Rider when he's out riding feeling sorry for himself one night, as almost every issue opens. And he... then, seeing Ghost Rider's powers as being legit, not just like a weird stunt act or whatever, he offers him like a place in his gang, and Ghost Rider's like, fuck that, but then he's like, fuck yes. So he joins the gang, which is bizarre. I don't really know what he sees to gain from it, except that he gets a place to lay his head for the one night. Because I don't know what he thinks is going to happen in the morning when he turns back into Johnny Blaze. Does he think they're just going to let him leave and go about his normal life? Like,
well, I mean,
I don't know what the fuck he thinks is going to happen.
Again, he's not really a traditional hero at this point. He becomes one later on, and then not one again even later on after that.
No, but I just practically, I don't know what he wants to gain from it. He's a fucking celebrity stunt cyclist. He doesn't need to join up with the criminal lifestyle for the money. I don't know what he wants to gain from it, like except just to get a place to rest his head for the night.
As you mentioned before, though, Curly does have some powers of persuasion.
Yeah, I think that's what's going on more so. And soon after that, it turns out that Curly isn't just taking an interest in Johnny Blaze because he wants the power for his weird biker gang. He is actually somebody Johnny knows. It's Crash Simpson, the adoptive father who died and caused Johnny to make the deal with the devil to try and save his life. But the devil took him anyway. And apparently at some point, either before his death or after, Crash made a deal with the devil himself to kill Johnny Blaze in return for being returned to life. So he's possessed the body of this Curly guy, I guess. That's never really explained. It's just kind of implied. And he goes after Johnny Blaze, trying to get him to join his biker gang and bring himself over willingly. But that doesn't pan out. So he kidnaps Roxanne, tries to force Johnny to turn himself over, reveals himself, and he and Johnny have a big naked fight. It's kind of great, isn't it, D?
Yeah, it's really good. That especially that last fight when you have the great reveal. It's handled really well. I don't think we're conveying how well the reveal is, how good the reveal is, because of how fucking tired we are of talking about this.
Yeah, no, we're sorry, guys. We're trying our best, but we're tired.
But it's a great reveal. It's done very well. I remember reading it. I was like, oh shit, and I was like immediately like, this should have been the movie. Like, why wasn't this the movie?
Because I think the soap opera nature of it helps and really plays up the intense, over the top drama of the whole thing. Like,
yeah,
if it would have turned out to have just been some guy, who gives a fuck? It's just weekly comic book bullshit. But because it turns out to be this guy who we thought was dead last issue, and also the guy who Johnny made the deal to save, that's got some real weight to it. And then there's some real weight to he and Johnny's conflict, because he wants to kill him because they had a falling out right before Crash died, although there was that great moment right before Crash crashed, where he gave Johnny the thumbs up. There's some really great pathos between the two of them that's really made use of when Crash tries to kill him and is naked in a loincloth striking at him with a sword. And that's just a great fight too because of the scenery and everything. It's awesome. It's fantastic. I just think that works really well for the tone of the thing. And I do think that the soap opera stuff works better sometimes than it does others. Like, I think it works really well in this early story arc, as we've mentioned. I think it doesn't work early on in the Native American snake shit because I don't care about the relationship between the guy and the witch woman. But then, once Snake Dance became kind of a good guy later, once his daughter gets sick and once Damien Hellstrom shows up, the drama between him and the son-in-law, I kind of enjoyed a little bit. But it's all over the place, I think. I think it all depends on how it's relating to the satanic shit. And early on it works, and later on it kind of works, but not so much in between there, I think.
I just want to shout out because I know when we did those Ultraman manga reviews over on Andres' channel, we were sure to point out like specific panels that really caught our attention. I think it's important when you review a comic book to point out really good visuals. And my God, issue 8 opens up with some amazing visuals because you've just had the reveal of who Curly was at the end of the last issue. They're in hell. Roxy is chained to an altar, and you just see Ghost Rider about to have a fight with Curly, or not Curly. He's in his Crash Simpson form now, and he's just got a flaming sword, and it's fucking beautiful. it's really amazing.
It's pretty cool.
It's a weird issue though because
the whole thing's fucking weird. That's kind of the beauty of it. I kind of wish it was weirder.
But issue 8 in particular is a very weird issue because the Curly story wraps up halfway through the issue, and then the rest of the issue is the beginning of the Snake Dance shit.
I forgot about that, huh? That's fucking nuts.
It's really strange. It's like they ran out of pages on the Curly thing, and they were like, start writing the next story, guys. Anyway, they have a short fight in hell. I don't remember the particulars, but Johnny convinces Crash to be like, yo, fuck this devil guy. Plus, you've been trying to kill your daughter. This is fucked up. And so
he kind of realizes that. And he also... It seems like his whole kind of thing is Johnny Blaze is a cowardice piece of crap. Fuck him. He doesn't deserve to be my daughter's lover. But more than that, I don't trust him to take care of my daughter now that I'm gone. So I think he wants to return to life to protect his daughter, pull her away from Johnny so that way he can make a better life for her and get Johnny out of the way so she's not in the way of whatever he thinks is a better life for her. I think that's all really interesting. There's a lot of pathos there with father-son relationships, especially since Crash is also Johnny's adoptive father, and he doesn't approve of the direction that Johnny's taken, which is fair enough. He's kind of just doing nothing at that point anyway. But now he's Ghost Rider, and he's doing nothing with his head on fire, which I guess is a little better. But yeah, no, I think that's all great. I think the first arc is really great. I just think that the issue with all of these issues, not so much in that first arc, becomes more of an issue later. It always ends with a girl being tied down to an altar with a pentagram painted on her, being fucking sacrificed to Satan, and I just think that gets really old. And it's just it's the best form of exploitation at the time, but I'm sick of seeing it over and over again.
Well, like I said, it always ends with like a Deus Ex Machina taking out the villain. Literally, later on in the next arc, and I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, later on in the next arc when Ghost is having his fight with...
Well, let's just move on to that. I don't really have much else to say about that Crash.
Okay, well, all I wanted to say about the Crash thing is he convinces Crash to turn against Satan, and then they go to escape from hell, but he doesn't escape from hell, but Johnny does with the help of a mysterious hooded figure who will later on be revealed his identity, but we won't get to that in this run. Blah, 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 blah. Him and Roxy get back to Earth. And then he goes out into the desert to jump a canyon, and then a bunch of crazy shit starts happening with some Native Americans, and we can talk about that more in detail as we go on. But anyway, what I was going to say, with regards to the way they keep sort of copping out at the end of stories, is when he's fighting the witch woman, she gets defeated because Satan just like basically is too impatient. Like, he gives her so long to kill him, and when she doesn't get it done in that amount of time, Satan pretty much takes her out. Like, if he had just waited a minute, she would have won, probably.
I don't remember this. What are you talking about?
There's like she fails Satan, and he just is kind of like, fuck you, and then he takes over her body because he's like, I'll fucking do this shit myself.
Right, because she dies. She explodes or whatever, and Johnny escapes. Right, okay, I remember that now, yes.
But literally, if the devil could have just waited for like a minute, she might have won the fight, won the battle.
What happened was she started fucking ranting and raving about. So she is a shit agent of the devil. He was right to get rid of her because she started ranting and raving about her backstory to Johnny, and he only escaped because she had like some weird. She had used her Hellfire constructs, which she is able to do, and he's not because she's trained, and she was using that to keep Johnny captive. And because of her, like, orgasmic fucking intensity at remembering her fucking backstory, like when she was first sacrificed to Satan and was, like, married to him through the fucking, like, through the sacrifice.
And then reborn.
Her hold on the bonds dissipates, and she loses him. So it's her fucking fault. So she was deserved of being let go. But I don't know, that part was okay. Her backstory was okay. I like that she's like this.
It just struck me as odd because Satan was the Deus Ex Machina to his own agent.
Right?
Like that's how desperate they were to like. I'm like, can Ghost Rider beat his own enemy once?
And also,
like,
he's just really shit. Like, he doesn't know how to do anything. Like, he can just shoot fire out of his hands, and that's about all he's good for. He's just the Human Torch, but he's on a motorcycle.
Right.
Which I think was kind of the idea, but it's very distracting early on because there's not much more to his fighting style. But yeah, what I was also gonna say is that I find it crazy that a Native American like medicine woman with spiritual ties, who already has some magical kind of ability, then becomes a servant of Satan and can manipulate Hellfire. What are the odds, right?
Yeah, really. Well, it's not really. I'm not really sure if she had any magical ability. Her dad seems to.
But just that's still a coincidence, though, that he has magical abilities, so then she does, and gets them from a separate source. Then,
yeah, it's weird. It's weird.
There's a lot of weird coincidences like that. Do you want to talk about the snake shit? Because it's
okay. So the first couple issues of this whole arc, and it's almost like a mini arc, really, before the witch woman shit happens. But there's this whole thing where they get, like I said, they go out to the desert because Johnny's going to jump this canyon, and there's a bunch of Native Americans who are not happy about this because land. And they've got and this particular tribe, I believe they're Apaches, has sort of been led astray by this.
Whatever like racial fucking stereotype was prominent at the time for Native Americans. That's what they are.
Well, I'm pretty sure it was actually stated that they're Apache. Anyway.
There's a lot of like offhand comments by a lot of the white guys in this though about them, so that could just be like a weird offhand reference that one of them is making and not accurate, but who knows.
But anyway, they have been sort of led astray by this witch doctor guy called Snake Dance, who is sort of trying to return them to like the old ways because he kind of believes that like if they return to like this, because apparently Apaches had like an old snake religion. Not sure if that's accurate, but we'll roll with it. But he believes
the snakes are prominent in a lot of Native American lore. All animals are, but I don't know if they ever worshipped a big snake like they do in this.
Exactly. So he kind of believes that if they sort of return to this ancient snake religion that apparently they had, and kind of like use this snake magic that he's privy to, that they can sort of regain their power and overthrow the white man and yada yada yada. It doesn't work out so well for him. He ends up kidnapping Roxy, and she gets bit by snakes, and almost dies, actually. He is at least effective in that regard. He managed to kill Roxy better than Satan did. But anyway.
He's pretty successful. He also manages to...
Oh, yeah, the first time...
He also manages to kill Ghost Rider because he runs Johnny off a cliff. He falls. He dies. And Satan brings him back to life because Satan has this oath on him where he's like, I'll protect you because I want your soul. So he won't die. He's under Satan's protection as long as Satan's after his soul, which is awesome.
Exactly. Yeah, because the first time they encounter each other, he sort of like ambushes Ghost Rider, and his snake magic takes Ghost Rider by surprise.
Yeah, and as much as I don't love this arc, it's kind of just more. It's identical to the last one in a lot of the broad strokes, a wayward relationship between father and daughter, where the daughter doesn't approve of what the father is doing, and the father hates Ghost Rider for some reason, and there's jealousy between people over relationships and whatever. It's just the same shit, and what makes it sort of interesting, though, but it's drawn out for way too long, is the Native American stuff. The different flavor that magic gives to the magic that's being used against Ghost Rider. It's great. It's nice to see the iconography and the sort of over-the-top abilities of the Christian mythology that Ghost Rider comes from being mixed in with in Satanism and all that, and mixed in with like this traditional Native American lore. and fighting that. Like, it's really cool. I love stuff like that. But it's drawn out for too long. Like, it's crazy that's a longer arc than the Crash Simpson is Curly arc, because I would say that's almost more complicated. Well, no, not complicated in terms of the plot.
This has a lot more moving parts to it, and I think that's why it takes up more issues.
But you think the emotional impact of that Crash Simpson story would take longer to really simmer? Like, I think you would make that longer in a comic now. But
I think so. I think at the time, though, again, you got to remember when this was made. I think the comic writers were a bit more focused on going through the story beats than they were like sort of delving too deeply into the pathos. Although there is quite a bit of pathos. Johnny Blaze as a character has tons of great pathos, but it's just at the time I think they were a little bit more focused on writing down the story for this week and getting paid and moving on to the next one.
And you can tell that these are come up with on the fly. Like, these are just constructed week to week based on whatever was there last week. It's kind of fascinating, and it kind of makes it definitely gives the story its own unique kind of flavor that comes across in the writing that I kind of enjoy. That's part of the reason I love comics, is the way that they were written kind of impacted their narrative point, and that's always interesting to me, and that's definitely prevalent in this.
I also want to mention, just for the sake of thoroughness, that during all this, there's this subplot where Johnny has like this stage manager who looks like Future Trunks from DBZ, and
Bart Slade, I think is his name.
Yeah, there's this blue-haired guy. Although in the movie he was played by that red-haired guy who now plays Harvey Bullock on Gotham. Anyway,
oh yeah, guy from Grounded for Life, yeah.
Yeah, he's super resentful of Johnny Blaze because Johnny's kind of an asshole, and he wants to be the star, and he tries to jump the canyon himself because Johnny is late because he's busy dealing with all this Indian shit, and the guy winds up dying. It's not a very complicated subplot.
It's a crazy scene though, because Ghost Rider's in a taxi or some shit, and he's Ghost Rider at that point because it's night, so he's Ghost Rider, like flaming skull, everything. He goes to the canyon, watches the guy fucking blow up. Roxy's watching the guy blow up. She's sitting in a wheelchair because she just got cured of the snake shit. And there's nothing Ghost Rider can do to save this guy. And he just has to explain to Roxy why he wasn't there. And then they ride, I believe, on Johnny's motorcycle back to the hospital because Johnny has been injured in a bike accident. And the only reason he can walk now is because he's the Ghost Rider. So he has to get back to the hospital before he turns back into Johnny Blaze. Otherwise, he's going to be, like, he won't be able to move. Like, he'll be crippled. That's crazy. Yeah, basically, there's some crazy, great moments in this arc like that are just awesomely over the top and insane. But it's just, the plot is just fucking dragging you along by a string. And it's dragging you. You're like, I don't want to go with this anymore. Can we do something else? But it's just dragging you along. Introducing new elements, the witch woman, the Satan, that she works for Satan. Satan's got this new grand plan for getting Johnny's soul. The witch woman fails. Satan takes over the witch woman's body. Damian Hellstrom shows up to solve all the problems. It's really complicated, but issue to issue, it's kind of okay. It's kind of fun. It's all introduced well enough, I suppose. I feel like it's like watching Dragon Ball Z episode to episode. Like,
it is.
It's fun. It's fun enough to watch episode to episode. Like, it's well written enough. Everything's introduced fine. It's well written. It's well produced. But the overall story that it's trying to tell is just too bloated, and it takes too long to get to the point.
Yeah. It's very similar to that. Like, issue to issue, it's keeping you engaged. It's only later on when you start thinking about the arc in full that you're like, wow, like, what the fuck is going on? I'm glad you mentioned. I had forgotten there is this neat sort of dynamic there for a while where Johnny is basically crippled from a bike accident, and so every night when he turns into the Ghost Rider, he basically has to break out of the hospital, and then at the end of every night when he's about to turn back into Johnny Blaze, he has to, like, break back into the hospital. Like, it's that's an interesting thing.
It's a weird. There's a bunch of monster movies that do that. Like in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. The Wolfman does that. Like, he's in the hospital as Larry, and then he turns into the werewolf and escapes. There's an episode of The Hulk, the TV show, where they do that, where he thinks the only way to... he gets paralyzed, and he thinks the only way to cure his paralysis is to turn into the Hulk. It's awesome. Anyway, So where are we? So we've covered a lot.
We were talking about Snake Dance. We've kind of been jumping all over the place because this arc is kind of complicated and it's hard to talk about in a linear
Yeah,
fashion.
yeah.
We were
Well,
talking about
what else
Snake
did
Dance.
you want to cover?
Well, okay, so there's a scene after Snake Dance has had Roxy bitten by the snakes. Ghost Rider shows up, and I love in the comics. There's these moments that happens periodically where Ghost Rider just gets pissed off and goes scorched earth on a group of motherfuckers.
Oh right, this is when you fucking. Oh right, go ahead. Describe what happens.
And this is the first time I can think of this. So all these Indians are gathered around as Snake Dance is sacrificing this girl to the snake gods, and he summons these two snakes from his arms, and they bite her, and she's been poisoned. She's gonna die, and they're all sort of chanting, running around and doing their chanting or whatever the fuck they do. And then Ghost Rider just shows up, and he is pissed, and he just fucking burns all of their shit to the ground.
He says, "I will scorch the earth that you hold so sacred for what you've done to me." And he just burns this reserved, sacred Native American like holy ground because they had a couple of snakes bite his girlfriend. It kind of plays into the whole Johnny's kind of a dick thing, but this is a lot more like valid and sympathetic than when he called his crippled friend and he was making fun of him and shit and being a dickhead to him. This is a bit more understandable and interesting because he is the Ghost Rider when he does this. I find it kind of interesting that he uses the power to do this and do this kind of morally gray thing. Because yeah, sure, they went along with the whole getting his girlfriend bitten by snakes thing, but you don't have to scorch their fucking whole home just because you're mad.
And he pretty much only stops because he realizes he has to get her to the hospital. Like,
Yeah.
if it hadn't been for that fact, they would probably all be dead.
Probably.
If anybody listening to this review is familiar with the Daimajin trilogy, which if you're not, don't worry, we plan on reviewing it in the future. But
hopefully that'll go better than this.
all of those destruction scenes where Daimajin shows up and just fucks up the bad guy's entire life, this is akin to that. Like, this is Ghost Rider gone ape shit, and it's fantastic. I love it so much. But after that, Snake Dance falls out of favor with the Native Americans. They almost lynch him at one point, but his daughter, who's named Linda Littletree, comes back from college, and then it's revealed that she is a Satan worshiper. She is the witch woman that we've been referring to on and off during this review. She tries to kill the Ghost Rider, fails like we mentioned. Her body gets possessed by Satan.
She's a good villain, though. She's got spunk and personality, and she's got a point. She doesn't like men.
I really like her power set and how she's able to control her powers better than Ghost Rider. I'm kind of upset that this is the only story that she's in, because I think she could have made a really cool recurring villain, actually.
She dies, and then Satan just kind of throws her off to the side.
Right. He takes over her body.
And we don't see what really happens to her after that, do we? Like, she's just kind of unconscious with Johnny Blaze in hell, and then they just leave her there, don't they?
Well, for a while, she's in her dad's house, and she's like...
okay, so she's in after this, okay.
Because I guess it took time for Satan to, like, get her body up and moving again or some shit. I don't really understand. But she's like, in her house, and she's at her dad's house, and she's kind of passed out. And then her dad and the, like, leader of the Native Americans, who's kind of her love interest as well.
Oh, you're still talking about this story arc. Okay, gotcha.
What were you talking about?
I thought we were talking about after this, because I was talking about the end, where she and Johnny Blaze are like knocked out in hell, and Damian Hellstrom comes in, and I just couldn't remember what happened to her after that.
I haven't gotten there yet. Okay, so as I mentioned, she tried to beat Ghost Rider. She failed. Her body gets possessed by the devil after that point. Her dad summons Damian Hellstrom to perform The Exorcist, because they've heard of this guy. He's like a famous exorcist, apparently. And then he winds up being the son of Satan, which
is a cool scene. It's a really cool scene where he's like, I'll help you, but you also have to help me. Lock me in this room and don't let me out, no matter how much I beg you. Which is a very like.
If you've seen a horror movie ever, you know that when somebody locks themselves in a room and begs another character not to let them out, no matter what happens, that motherfucker's gonna get let out of that room.
I remember it mostly in comedies. Funnily enough, like it reminds me of that bit from Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, where they lock the Wolfman in the hotel room and. Costello goes in to like check on him, and the werewolf is just chasing him around and is just barely missing him. And then there's also that bit in Young Frankenstein where Frederick asks them, no matter how much I beg you, don't let me out. I have to make this work.
Yeah.
And he goes in and he
And
talks to the monster.
in that one, it's played for laughs because after that, he's like, "Let me out," and they won't because he told them not to.
Which is what happens in this, but it's not played for laughs because they fuck up. They go in.
You know what it reminds me of? There's this episode of The Twilight Zone where this guy comes across this like old monastery, and the monks have got this guy locked in a room, and they won't let him out. And like they keep telling him, "Don't release him from that room. He's the devil. If you release him, he's gonna fuck shit up." And the guy doesn't believe them. He thinks they're crazy. And the guy on the other side of the door sounds like nice enough. He's like, "Please let me out." So at the end, the guy lets the guy out of the room. Sure enough, it was the devil, and then the devil goes off and causes World War One.
Wow, I never knew World War One was because of the devil being locked in a monastery. I thought it was because some dude got shot.
Well, you know,
did the devil shoot that dude? Archduke Ferdinand or whatever his name was?
I think the devil caused those other guys to shoot that dude.
Oh, he was just like, you guys want to shoot this guy? It'd probably be fun. Sure.
Well, it wasn't a couple Serbian guys, and he just went up to him and he's like, "Yo, see that guy over there?"
Just a couple of bumblefuck Serbians just hanging out at the local tavern or whatever.
He's like, "Go shoot that guy. It'll be fun." And I'm like, all right.
D,
millions of deaths later.
D, what do you think of the Son of Satan, though?
I enjoy his character. You're not super familiar with him. I'm not really super familiar with him either, but I have read some shit with him in it before.
He's okay. He's got a dumb design, and cool character idea, but just a really dumb, just really kind of like overly flamboyant design. Would you agree?
Later on, in some of the more recent comics with him in it that I've read, they just sort of scaled it back to portraying him as like a shirtless dude with a pentagram on his chest and a trident, and that's fine, you know.
He looks a little bit too much like Aquaman or like Namor to me.
It is
but that's okay. He is very Namor-esque in terms of his characterization.
Basically a red-headed Namor in terms of his design.
Yeah, he wants revenge for his mother and shit, and he's all about his heritage and everything, and he's of two worlds. He's very Namor.
Also, if anybody out there is familiar with a Marvel character called Satana, who is a succubus, that's his sister. Satana Hellstrom is her name.
That being said, when he gets thrown in those last two issues, and especially the Marvel Spotlight issue, that's all about him. Because the last issue of this story arc is not actually a Ghost Rider issue. It's a Marvel Spotlight on the Son of Satan issue. I was just like, I don't even know if I care anymore. I read this to read a Ghost Rider story, but instead I just get this weird shirtless dude. It's good, but again, it's just the issue that we mentioned earlier of just, when you put these things together, it's just kind of a weird, convoluted mess. So I think that's the biggest sin of the entire second story arc, is that it's too long and too drawn out and too overly complicated, and it just doesn't go anywhere real interesting. But there's some really good bright spots in it.
That being said, the Son of Satan is a badass. Like, once he shows up, he just starts fucking like Satan shit up.
When he's goes into hell,
he's like, "No, you're gonna release Johnny Blaze. Like, that's just what's gonna happen." Like,
yeah, he goes into hell and he goes, "I have this trident. You can't do it, Dad. You can't do anything when I have this trident. How does that make you feel?" And it's like, "Oh, I'm real proud because you're strong, but I'm also real mad because you're a real prick. Fuck off." And he's like, "Okay, but I'm taking these guys with me." He's like, "Oh, I really wanted those guys." He's like, "I know you did. That's why I'm taking them." "Ooh, you're a real rascal, you. We're going to have dealings later." He's like, "I bet. I'm going to have my own comic book series soon, so you'll appear in that, presumably."
If you want to know what the Son of Satan's personality is, he's basically Vegeta, but a demon.
Yeah, because at the end, Johnny Blaze is like, "Oh, you're helping us. You're great." And he's like, "No, I'm the Son of Satan, actually. I'm just helping you because it's convenient for me." And then he takes them out of the hell dimension.
He basically was just wanting to fuck around with his dad. So he's like, "Yeah, I helped you get out of hell, but now I'm just going to leave you here in the desert."
Yeah, which also fucks Johnny Blaze over because he's still crippled. So if he turns back into Johnny Blaze, he'll be fucked. But now he's got to like walk back to the hospital. So he really fucked him over good. But it's a great ending. Really good.
Now Linda Littletree, she's free of the Son of Satan at this point. She's been removed from hell by Son of Satan, but she also, of course, no longer has her hell powers. And she actually, but since Johnny has very similar powers to what she had, she actually instructs him on how to create Hellfire constructs. And this is the first time we see Johnny Blaze Ghost Rider actually create a motorcycle out of his Hellfire. Previously, he always would just have to use a motorcycle, either the one that he already had or find a motorcycle. But now he has the ability to conjure up a motorcycle out of thin air, and it's amazing. It's the first time we see Ghost Rider get a new power. It's something that he uses quite a bit in future issues until he gets the more famous Skull Cycle. But
I do prefer a physical motorcycle that he just ramps up with the Hellfire. Like the Hellfire, like the one that he makes with the Hellfire is cool, but I prefer one that he makes himself. That he just uses like a practical one.
My only gripe is that after he creates the Hellfire cycle, it's still like made out of fire, like it's still orange and shit. I would prefer it if he like formed it and then it sort of just became an actual motorcycle until he made.
Doesn't really make any sense though.
No, it doesn't. Well, it's fucking Satan magic. It doesn't have to make sense.
I guess not. I guess that's the thing that we ultimately take away from these issues is that it's Satan magic. It doesn't really make sense, but it's fun.
Like if he could just conjure up the fucking motorcycle from the Nick Cage movie, which again, that is amazing. But if he could just conjure up that motorcycle and then when he was done with it, like snap his fingers and make it disappear into the ether, like that would be really cool.
I feel like that one was over designed though. Like I kind of prefer in the second one where they explain that he just takes over whatever he touches and like it just becomes a Ghost Rider version. Like at one point he goes on like a crane and it becomes like a Ghost Rider crane. Like that was cool.
They really didn't have to explain that, though. It was pretty obvious that that's what's going on in the first
Yeah,
movie.
I know, but it's for dumb idiots who can't intelligently read things that are going on the frame, so they had to say it.
Not only does it happen with motorcycle, it happens with that shotgun at the end of the first movie.
That too. But hey, listen, we're over an hour in, so what else do you want to say?
Well, that's the end of the story. We're done recapping what happened. So I guess we're just down to general thoughts. Other than the issues that we've pointed out with these first two story arcs and the origin issue that preceded them, I really enjoyed reading these. I think it's clear to me why Ghost Rider is a character that has actually stuck with us until this day now, even though he's maybe a bit less appreciated than your more popular Marvel characters.
Because he's fucking cool looking.
He's definitely a B-list character, unfortunately. A lot of people not that big into the whole Ghost Rider thing. I can't even find it in most stores. I find like I can't go to Barnes & Noble and find Ghost Rider shit. I have to read it online. But I fucking love him. And I think, again, if I was reading this back in the day, if I was around in the 70s and I read this run, I think I definitely would keep reading. Because although there are problems with it, I think it does do a good job of engaging you and making you interested in the character and making you just want to see what happens next. And I think it's obvious. I think it would have been just as obvious to someone reading the comic back then as it is to me now that they hadn't really figured out what they wanted to do with Ghost Rider yet. And so I would have probably just kept reading it just out of a factor of like, oh, I want to see what they fucking like do with this guy. Like I want to see what direction they wind up taking, you know. And I think ultimately the direction that they did wind up taking worked out really well, and now we've got several Ghost Riders and shit. But yeah, so overall, other than some narrative issues, I enjoy these comics, and I tend to look at these classic comics just as that, classic comics, and I view them in regards of the time period that they came out in and what their contemporaries were like.
You see,
how about you?
You see, it's harder for me to do that now, like excuse them for that and kind of like enjoy them in despite of that, I guess is more of the issue. Like, it still definitely impacts my ability to enjoy them. Because you can also tell in terms of the actual quality of the story, what elements of it are just really held back by the time. That being said, I also really enjoy reading these. And like I said, it's like watching Dragon Ball Z. Moment to moment, reading each issue, you enjoy it because it's well produced, it's well made, it's got good art, it's got good writing, and it's made by people who know what they're doing. It's good, it's enjoyable. But as a piece, it just doesn't hold together real well, and it definitely leaves you kind of wondering what the point of all of it is. So I'm glad that they eventually did find a point, and it was a good point. There's good ideas in here. And like you said, you can definitely tell why this character stuck around for as long as he did, and was remolded into all the different versions. Because there's a lot of really good ideas, more than just the cool design like I joked about a couple minutes ago. I mean, that is, I think, the key thing. He's fucking cool looking, especially when Mike Ploog originally drew him. But,
oh, yeah.
more than that, there's a lot of really interesting character faucets to this concept of a man who turns into this, who's forced into this deal to turn into this demonic servant of the devil who rides on a motorcycle and causes chaos with hellfire. It's awesome, and there's a lot you can do with that. And I think that the different directions that writers have taken it is a testament to how good the concept was initially, because all those different directions could be taken. And I think that even these early issues are a good foundation, and you should read them to see how these ideas started for what came later, and for all kinds of other ideas. It's just a good comic book version of the man becoming a monster scenario. Somebody's calling me. That's unfortunate. We were just about to end, and this has gone pretty well despite this being the third time we've done this so far. But anyway, I really like them. The art is amazing, and there are some revolutionary for the time ideas in the writing, and I think that that's really what you got to give it a go for, is to see all those things start. But again, read them in color to fully appreciate them. You're in for some really good spectacle. So if you're looking for something to just kind of throw yourself into, just kind of emotionally and intellectually just kind of mull over something, I think this is good. I think that this is a good thing to kind of get wrapped up in. There's a lot of it. It's complicated. It's kind of depressing. It's fun. It's crazy. I think that there's a lot there. I think that it's a good thing to kind of get into. And once you have, you can come back and listen to this tired attempt to do this series justice and see if you agree with the point yourself. So, D, I think that's going to do it.
Indeed. If you guys enjoyed this very tired attempt at a review, despite our diminishing interest, maybe in the future we can talk about some future arcs. I don't know, because in this one, when I messaged Bill and was like, yo, we should talk about these early Ghost Rider comics, I knew like Marvel Spotlight 5 through 12 and plus the first 2 issues of his solo title, because I was like, it was one run to me. After that, it all kind of blends together, and so I'm not really sure like how much of it we would be reviewing if we do a sequel review.
As much as we can kind of read at a time, I think, and we'll kind of cover. But yeah, I would like to do this again, so we'll bring this back for sure. Hopefully we'll be less tired and less worn out by the time we do it, but I'm sure we will. So hopefully you enjoyed what we could bring to the table with this one. Definitely tell us how this one turned out. You know, we definitely had some issues getting here, but I ultimately enjoyed having a good time talking about it with you.
However good this review was to you, imagine it like 3 times better the first time we did it.
Yeah, it was longer. I was less tired. I was still pretty tired though. But anyway, so in the interest of trying to get everybody to bed as quickly as possible, be sure to like us on Facebook and all the things there. The SOS Network homepage, the Odyssey page, everything. You should look out for soon. New edition of Godzilla Odyssey Retrospective will be coming up soon. That'll be on a crossover with the DC universe. And next time, we're going to be doing another thing we've been looking forward to doing for a while, which is what exactly, D?
Well, the current arc, well, not current anymore, wow. The recent arc of Dragon Ball Super, the Black Goku Future Trunks shit, finally wrapped up. It went on a bit longer than the other arcs did. It was 20 episodes all in all, and plus there were breaks here and there for the Olympics and whatnot. But it's finally over. And so we're finally going to get to talk about it in the 4th installment of our Dragon Ball Super discussions here on the Demons from Outer Space.
So yes, indeed, look out for that next week, and we'll see you then. Until next time, I'm Bill Worster, aka Zazubaar.
I'm Super DM64.
Dem Germans, they be fucked up, and I'm so tired. Oh, I'm so tired. I want to go to bed. I want to sleep forever and die. Thank you.